get is, I don't know anything about racing. This is true. You're right. You're in the wrong show.
Yeah.
You're watching the wrong show if you want to hear like super engineer stuff.
And honorable mention, Alpine, because hello, French Revolution.
Hello, welcome to Hitting the Apex, our Formula One coverage, joined by my friend Evan Sones. Evan, how's it going, man?
What's going on, guys? How's everything today?
Yeah, can't complain. Jazz had a last minute engagement, so he's unable to join us tonight. If Carlos Sainz had won, maybe he'd be here, but Carlos Sainz did not win, and order was restored this week. So
it was
to Tap in the chat. Good seeing him at the Canes game in Philadelphia this weekend. In Houston, are we talking soccer here? Assume we're talking Miami FC.
What's up, Fernie?
All right, well, let's get to it. Japanese Grand Prix. I guess, what are your initial thoughts on that race? Obviously, Max kind of walked it, but kind of back to normal.
It was insane. Yeah, Max you look at some of the graphics and some of the stats that they showed from the qualifying even, he was in a whole other league. He looked like he was in a Formula One car and everybody else was in F2 cars. The whole weekend, between the strategy that they had and between just his raw pace and the way that he got into it and fired up the tires and just dominated the entire weekend. It was incredible. It was really a bounce back from Singapore. I mean, he needed to show to everybody, hey, there's no kink in the armor. There's no problems in Red Bull. It was just like Fernie said right there, it was a dominant performance. And we kind of expected that. We were talking about it, last week, how Honda likes to do good and over there in Suzuka in Japan, and he really did show out. I mean, it was one of the most dominant performances I've seen since even watching the Dolphins game this past weekend. I can't hear you. I don't know if your mic is off.
It did cut for a second. I think I should be back now.
Yeah,
you got me.
Now.
All right. Yeah, all sorts of technical difficulties happening here. We are doing our best.
You look like Sergio Perez.
Yeah, well, we'll get to him in a minute, boy.
Yeah.
But anyway, as you said, dominant. That the what we got on the screens, the race results shows it. Almost 20 seconds up on second place. That is, dominant in every fashion. Obviously, the McLaren's another good showing, second and third, and qualified that way. And then we get into some more. And his first podium as well. They kind of. So interesting enough, they took a gamble and didn't work. They went for the pit under the virtual safety car, and it was just too early. And so, and he didn't even get the full benefit of it because it was part way through the VSC. But they gambled on early pit stop. It ended up not working out well for him. He still finished third, but it did kind of cost him second, or a shot at second. I think Lando was probably faster anyway. Then we got Leclerc comfortably into fourth, which is he kind of controlled his race. And then we get to the drama. Hamilton, Sainz, and Russell there.
The last 6 laps were crazy between them.
Yeah, there was let's talk about the Russell and Hamilton. So Hamilton qualified ahead of Russell. Checo hit him in the down the start finish race, start of the race, and they said slightly damaged his car. It wasn't enough. They had to but I think it probably took a little bit of speed out. And then so Russell essentially was right on his tail the whole first stint. And then Hamilton made a mistake, and Russell was able to overtake. He passed back and took the place back. And then again later, Hamilton went wide. Russell tried to overtake her on the outside, and Hamilton used the whole track, we'll say.
It was a great battle.
Yeah, and at that point, Mercedes pulled the plug on it, pit Hamilton, and set Russell off on a one stop, so they wouldn't really. There was some drama late in the race with Russell not wanting to let Hamilton through. And I think Mercedes being fed up with Russell's attitude. I think that came across pretty clearly. We'll unpack that a little bit. Overall, what did you think of the Mercedes inter-team battle there?
I mean, it was a great battle right there in the middle of the race, lap, I think it was 33, 34, something like that. They were going at it with each other. And I mean, you saw Russ on the call saying, hey, are we going to race each other? Or are we going to race everybody else? What's the plan? And so eventually, George did get out in front. They pitted Lewis, like you said. But then towards the end of the race, where it was George Russell, then Hamilton, then Carlos Sainz, and you could just see George Russell didn't want to give up that spot until eventually Hamilton just pulled past him with those fresher tires. And then even Carlos Sainz got past him, towards or right at almost the very end of the race. And he went from having, an easy top 5 finish to, out in 7th at the end of the race, just because of the fact that you could tell he wears away those tires so much quicker than everybody else. Lewis is so much better on them. Carlos is so much better on his tires as well. And it saves it for those last couple laps. And we saw that last week, like we showed in Singapore, and it happened again this week. Towards the end of those runs, he just dies out and he can't keep the grip. He can't, make it or come off the corners, with the same type of acceleration that everybody else does. And especially on a track like Suzuka, you really need to get those corners dialed in, going in and out of them in the S's and at the spoon curve. That's a double apex, just to keep everything flowing as it does. You can't do that with worn out tires, and it showed. It really did.
Yeah, and like you said, it showed on the tire wear, and it was interesting that I guess he kind of fell into a one stop. But like George Russell's not the man to do a one stop, like you say, does not manage his tires well. And it was a bad fit for him there. And I thought the other thing, he said, what are we fighting each other or the other teams after he tried to unsuccessfully overtake. Very, very conspicuous timing, because if he actually felt that way, he would have just held station behind. It was after he was unable to pass, he got mad, Hamilton defended. And I think that actually drove their strategy. I think they're like, we're splitting these strategies, because the one stop was not a good strategy here, and you saw that at the end. But I think they just to get them away from each other essentially. But then, nature finds a way, and they ended up right there on each other again in the next towards the end. And Russell didn't want to let Hamilton through. And again, remember, this has happened before where he didn't let Hamilton through and ruin Hamilton's race. And so this time they just said that's an instruction. They weren't even listening to him. And I thought it was, for Mercedes, frankly, the whole thing where they were trying to like keep George Russell and Hamilton's DRS, that was never going to work here. And I don't know. It worked in Singapore in a very unique situation where, Norris and Sainz had the same, age on their tires. And Russell had shredded his tires catching up to the pack. In this instance, like, Russell's tires were so much older, because remember, he one-stopped. Like, he was not going to hold Sainz up regardless, and they actually exposed Hamilton doing it, which is why Hamilton stopped the race. Like, I don't know why they're having me try to keep him in my DRS. I did it, and he got passed easily anyway, because there's just no way with that tire deck. And I think, at this point, the whole thing should have been, George, move out of the way. Because he had already, Sainz got closer to Hamilton because Russell had held him up and made it harder to pass. And had they not given team orders, Hamilton would have eventually gotten around him. But at that point, Sainz would be riding on his gearbox, which is why they told him to move. And they should have done that earlier, actually, in my opinion, because to me, it cost Hamilton some time there and did expose him to Sainz, but he was able to hold him off because there's only I think a 4 or 5 lap difference between Sainz and Hamilton's tires. Russell was on a completely different strategy. He should have just moved
Yeah,
there.
he was way out there.
Yeah, no, I do
also
think they
at
talked to him.
Suzuka.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say also at Suzuka, it only has the one DRS zone, so it's not like at other racetracks where in multiple areas you could do that strategy where you keep the guy behind you, kind of like what Carlos Sainz did with Lando in Singapore, where there's multiple DRS zones in Singapore, and you're able to use a lot of the track like that. In Suzuka, there's only the one that goes down the front straightaway. That's it. So your car has to be faster around everywhere else as well. And you could just tell that Russell's car wasn't.
Right, and like you said, there was other overtaking out on the rest of the track too when you had better traction. So he was a sitting duck, and it was just wasn't really worth fighting it at that point. I do think they talked to him after the race because after he was much more conciliatory in his post-race comments about, well, the heat of battle, you say things, and I think there was like a look enough of this because I think even in because remember he started trying to argue with them about letting Hamilton through, and they're just like, that's an instruction. We're not having this conversation with you. We said what we need to say. You need to move over. There was another. I don't know if you caught this because I don't think they covered this during the race, although it was like 3 a.m, so I wasn't very lucid. But there was drama between the Alpines as well. I don't know if you saw this.
I saw a little bit of the drama between it, but not all of it.
Okay, so what happened is Ocon was ahead of Gasly. They let Gasly pass because they were on different strategies to try and get to try and have Gasly make up places. He was unable to, so he's still in front of just Ocon at the end. And they made him switch back on the last lap because Ocon had the position, and Gasly got mad. He said, "I don't understand how you wait." He thought it was like he was like, "Is this a joke? What are you talking about?" And they went back and forth several times, like, we'll talk in the debrief, let him through. We'll talk in the debrief, let him through. And he's like, this is an instruction. This is an order. This is not a joke. We'll talk in the debrief. And Gasly's argument on the radio was, I was on fresher tires. I would have passed him anyway. And so he's like, even if you didn't let me through, so why am I giving the place back? But they made him give the place back. Afterwards, Ocon said that's always been, because remember, Ocon's been there a long time with that team. He said that's always been the rule here. If you give the place up and the other car doesn't make places up, he gives it back. I've had to do it before. So I guess just Gasly felt like if they just let them race, he would have passed on track anyway. And now he has to give the place up because they let him through. But there was some back and forth there. Again, we're talking about, I believe, actually can pull the race results up. I think that was a 9th and 10th, so it wasn't exactly a big points difference. But they did, for Alpine, it's good they got them both in the points though.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's kind of interesting to think that from Ocon's point of view, this is how we've always done it. They just got a new team director. Like, they just got new people over there in Alpine. Like, they're restructuring things. How are you thinking that this is it's the same as always? Team orders is something to me that unless it's a situation like we're having with Mercedes or even McLaren early in the race, where you can clearly see that these cars are going faster, and you can clearly see that the tires are better. Like, it's something that's always perplexed me. It's always been like, you let these guys race, man. Like, these guys are at it, 24/7 training and practicing and going on sims and testing these cars and stuff like that. For you to have to tell one of these guys, "Hey, get behind your teammate," just because we say so, it's such a tough thing, and it's all about egos too. These guys have ginormous egos. Like, they're thinking to themselves, I'm faster. I'm always faster. I've always been the fastest. These guys have been the fastest, since they were in go-karts. And now they get here and they're getting told, even though they think that they're faster than the guy in the exact same car as them, that no, you got to get behind them. Like, it's tough. And especially with a guy like Gasly. Gasly's a quality driver, we've all seen that. And so is Ocon, but Ocon has what, 2 wins in Formula One? Gasly has 2 wins. They have similar amount of wins, I think, something like that.
I think they both have one,
I don't
right?
know.
They both have one, I think.
Yeah, I know Gasly won in what was it, Monza a few
Yeah, he
years
won in
back.
Monza, and then in the AlphaTauri, and then Ocon won in Alpine in Hungary.
Okay, that's what it was. So they both have 1 win. They're both young drivers. They're both quality drivers. I mean, realistically, they're probably the one team in Formula One with drivers that are the most equal. Where you could really say, I mean, we look at Ferrari and kind of think a similar thing. Hey, who's really the number one in Ferrari right now? Is it Leclerc? Is it Sainz? We all know it's Leclerc. But in Alpine, it's like realistically, you don't really know who the number one driver is there. I mean, is it Ocon because he's been there longer? Is it Gasly because he qualifies a little better? So that's an interesting dynamic, and we'll see how they play it moving forward. If there's a similar situation, or with the roles reversed, let's see how it works out.
Yeah, and I think so. It's kind of an interesting debate, though, in terms of when they're on different strategies, that's when they generally let them through because there's no point in fighting if you're kind of. I'm curious why they let Gasly through because he wasn't catching Alonso, and I think that was the goal. And then when that wasn't going to happen, then it kind of, there was no real point to do that, and it did, to Gasly's point, did cost him a chance to fight for that position. But maybe they just didn't want them fighting for that position anyway, because again, you don't want to have a crash there because they did score 3 points, which isn't a lot, but they both finished in the points, which they have not done lately. So it was overall a good race for them anyway. And these things become exactly. They both finished it. These things become a lot more serious when you're competing for race wins and stuff. Then it becomes, but 9th and 10th probably. I don't think Gasly lost any sleep over it at that point.
Yeah.
All right, we've danced around one. You'll notice there's a Red Bull missing from the points.
There is.
What is your overall assessment of Checo's performance there?
I think he stretched himself way too thin. I think that he was pushing way too hard in the beginning of the race, and he just overdid it. And as soon as that happened, I'm in the restaurant business. We've talked about that before. We call it being in the weeds. In the restaurant business, you get in the weeds, and in the weeds means that one thing happens, then everything starts to snowball, and eventually you feel like you're walking around in weeds around your feet, and you can't do anything, and it slows you down so much. I think a similar thing happened with Checo this week. He wanted to push hard. He wanted to be up there with Max. He wanted to fight for that win because he knew that car can do it. But then everything started to snowball. He had that incident, down the front straightaway. He had another incident going into the hairpin. He swapped out 3 wings, right? 2 or 3 front wings during that race. I mean, you never see that. And then on top of that, they took him out of the race and then put him back in the race and then took him out of the race and then put it it was a frustrating situation to just sit there and watch. Not even, to be a part of, obviously. These guys, you can't even imagine what these guys must have been going through in their head during that whole thing because, with Christian Horner making that decision, it's like, how do you tell your driver, hey, your car's done, you're out for the day? Yeah. Oh, wait, but hold on. No, get back in the car so that we can take the penalty so that it doesn't affect us for the next race. It's, and I think Formula One has now closed that loophole, if I'm not mistaken. Since that happened, like they're not allowed it to happen again. But it's just
I think because technically he was eligible to have penalty. If you don't serve a penalty during a race, you can have penalties added to the start of your next race. So to avoid that. And open-ended, by the way, it's not just they'd add 5 seconds. They could give them a 10-place grid drop or whatever if they want. They could do whatever they want. So by serving the penalty, they took advantage of a loophole there. That allowed him to serve the penalty when it didn't matter. And that was actually first of all, I agree with your assessment. I think he knows he's not performing, and he knows he knows what Red Bull does to drivers that don't perform. and him at his best, and his claim to fame is a very smooth, controlled, cautious, patient driver that never puts in the fast lap, never puts in too slow of a lap, never makes the big mistake. It just steadily, puts in solid performances, and that's him at his best.
Yeah.
And him trying to press is just not his style. Remember, his biggest selling point before he came to Red Bull was this is a guy who's like easy on the tires because he drives so smooth.
Yep.
And he has now just turned into I am going for every corner and because he's trying to make up for underperformance elsewhere. And I mean, the start was bad, and I know they let a lot go at the beginning because he moved towards Hamilton, stopped because he saw him there, and then moved and knocked him out. I'm like, what do you know he was there because he just stopped that move. But you can almost see the gears turning in his head, like I can't let a Hamilton be in front of me, and he just I don't think meant to knock him out, but then he did. He kind of was like he's gonna have to back out if I slide over, and Hamilton obviously didn't get hit.
Yeah,
and then the thing with Magnus, there was no gap there. He just went for it anyway, and after the race, Albon said they got to do something, and it's rare for drivers to call others out. He didn't say like, Checo's bad or anything, but he did say, these 5-second penalties don't matter. He got a 5-second. He hit me in Singapore, got a 5-second penalty, and didn't affect his race because, he was more than 5 seconds ahead of the car behind him. And then here, he was out of the race and he served a 5-second penalty, doesn't affect him again. And like, we got to think about what more we can do here to make these penalties meaningful because, I mean, he's a menace right now on the track. Like, you don't want to go near. If you're in front of him, he's going to hit you, trying to get around you. And it's just,
it's bad when Lance Stroll has less accidents than you do. And at this point, Lance Stroll is driving better than he is. And that's kind of scary. Lance Stroll has always been the guy, the past few years that does those type of boneheaded moves where, you go for the corners too hard and you pay the consequence for it. He's really gotten into that, especially the past couple of weeks. I think that there's a lot of pressure on him, obviously, but you see Liam Lawson, when 11th, and how can you not think to yourself, why wouldn't Red Bull just pull the trigger on that? Like, this kid came in there, he doesn't have a seat.
That's a piece of news we talked about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
They just signed them or AlphaTauri just announced that Yuki and Ricardo are going to be in for next year. So Liam Lawson's out of a seat. He's out of a car. Like there's no car for him to be in there unless somebody leaves. And
is Checo confirmed for next year?
He's still under contract, but I don't know if they've actually confirmed it. He's still under contract with them, but that's never stopped them from getting rid of a driver before.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that domino fall. In August, Horner said, in August, Horner said that he'll be back, but like you said, it's hard to justify the way he's driving now. And as this gets more competitive, Max is running away with it, but and actually we didn't even mention this. We probably should. Red Bull won the constructors on Saturday. So they got what they wanted out of the season, but as this gap closes up and over the next few years, because this is what always happens when you go through these car phases, they get closer and closer as it gets later in the cycle. They're not going to have these margins for Perez screwing around all the time. Like they doubled up Mercedes this year. It's going to be much closer next year. You got the Mercedes much stronger, the Ferrari much stronger, the McLaren much stronger. They're not going to be able to throw points away like this and win the constructors next year because Max basically can do it by himself this year. Like the driver, I mean, he hasn't quite officially clitzed the drivers. He'll do that in the next, but he is outscored by himself. All the other teams. That's not going to happen. In the future. And so I'm not so sure that we don't see, that move happen and Liam Lawson get into the AlphaTauri and probably Ricardo in the Red Bull. I mean, I think first Ricardo needs to come back. If he drives well though, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some movement there.
Well, like I
Speaking
said,
of
they did
which,
confirm at AlphaTauri. Yeah,
yeah, no, they
I
have,
was gonna
but
say
I mean, they can
did confirm it.
easily they can easily move
They'll move.
Ricardo to Red Bull and put Liam Lawson back in the AlphaTauri. I don't think Checo has much value for them, to be honest. Yuki does for the Japanese market and the Honda partnership. But anyway,
Yeah.
now we have the Constructors Open. Yeah, Red Bull won the Constructors Championship, but then that is tight. And this is where a lot of the Mercedes drama was like, we got to beat at least one of the Ferraris, which Hamilton did, because there's only a 20-point gap between Mercedes and Ferrari. Then man, Aston Martin has fallen. Remember, they've fallen way off. And McLaren might catch them by the end of the year. That's kind of the battles that we're looking at, is that really McLaren and Aston Martin, and then Ferrari and Mercedes. Those are the things to watch going forward.
Yeah, I mean, if McLaren keeps on having these races like they're having now, 2, 3, 3, 4, podiums, spouted throughout for the rest of the year. I mean, there's no reason why they're not going to be able to get up there with Aston Martin. I mean, Fernando Alonso was driving this race and talking, trash about how bad the car was driving. It was incredible, and the strategy that they put him on.
Yeah, they did pit him too early, and he kind of came out in the wrong place and just got eaten up. So they said they're putting everything into development. Are they? It's hard to understand. Well, it's hard to understand what's going on there and how far they've kind of fallen behind on the development race here. But yeah, like you said, McLaren's been scoring the most consistently, and with Stroll unable to score points, there's every possibility for McLaren to finish fourth in the constructors, which was unthinkable when the season started. And then the Ferrari Mercedes thing is going to go down to the last race for sure. Now onto the drivers, as we said, Max officially not champion yet. He can become, and probably will become, champion in the next race. Has a sprint race, so that'll probably be it. That he can clinch in the sprint race. So that's when we should expect him to clinch. Checo's still hanging on to that second, just barely, despite all of his no point scoring. I mean, Hamilton is in a decent third. You see Alonso still up there. Then this is where Sainz and Leclerc are tight. Russell and Norris are tied now, which again, pretty remarkable given the where McLaren
was at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and also Hamilton did comment a little bit on where they sit in the drive. He's like, I don't know what George is doing. We're not fighting for the drivers first because we're not close to each other. Which, I mean, that was throwing some shade at George Russell because they are not close to each other. And then also, it's like, obviously we're not competing for a championship, so why would we force our way through and wreck the cars and all that? So he did kind of talk a little bit about the gap between the two of them. That is there's a couple of sizable gaps here, but obviously the biggest one is Fernando to Lance Stroll is pretty egregious, and Aston Martin really lost an opportunity here if they had because that car was much stronger at the beginning of the year. Now it's not, and Stroll did not pick up the points he should have.
I mean, if you were Lawrence Stroll, would you call up Red Bull, tell your son to take a desk job in the back office of the team and say, hey, I'll give you whatever you want for Liam Lawson?
Probably not at this point. I don't think we've seen enough where he's I don't know. Actually, it's a very good question because it actually brings me to another question, which is what is the point of Aston Martin? Because if they're trying to actually say, hey, we're a top team, no, let Liam Lawson develop somewhere else. We'll take him later. Now, at this point, if you're going to keep the owner's son in one of the two seats, then it's just a vanity project for the kids, right? I mean, so if they're going to get rid, I mean, he's allegedly, there's rumors about him going and playing tennis as a career, not being in Formula One next year, which might be the case. And it'll be interesting how they fill that seat because they're still trying to develop right outside of, and Alonso's obviously great at that, but you need the other driver to be, someone that performs. And I don't know if they want to put a
Yeah,
young
you need
driver
something.
in there, or if they want someone a little bit more with more experience. Although I don't know who that is. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
I
He's
mean,
definitely an option, but I mean, do they not have young drivers in Aston Martin? They must have a young driver program. Was it
I
Dragovich?
mean, they
Is
have
that
Drogovic.
there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Drogovic. And then
maybe you
actually,
give
they
him a
just had
shot.
a test with. They just had a test with a female driver who just took the Aston Martin to Hungary and did a test day in Hungary.
Yeah, so I
One
think
of
they
the
have.
girls from the
Yeah,
W Series.
so I think if they're going if they're gonna go to a young driver, they might instead try to do one of their own.
Yeah,
Because again, as with Liam Lawson, it's been, it'll be expensive to get him, and then who knows if he's going to be good at
yeah.
developing the car. That car is not good right now. I mean, it's not bad, but it's fallen behind. It's the fifth car on the grid right now, so it really depends. But I don't really see
Well,
a good like complementary veteran driver for them to bring in either. Or like they're not going to bring in like Mick Schumacher or something.
no. I
So
mean, what would be interesting is if something happened with Carlos Sainz, or not Carlos Sainz, with Checo, because if something happened with Checo, they could bring Checo into that seat, and he's already got the Red Bull experience, and we all know that Aston Martin just agreed in Red Bull, and that's why they've fallen off so much is because they can't develop the car like they do over in Red Bull, and for something that's we're not going to say it's like how back in when it was Racing Point, how it was the pink Mercedes, and you could literally tell by looking at the car that it was a direct copy. This one takes a lot of inspiration from that Red Bull car, and who knows, if something like that happens, that might be an interesting play on how that would work out. Take Lance out and say, hey, we're going to put Checo here, and see how everything else plays out in the silly season as they call it.
yeah, I do wonder how that goes over going back to the team that Lawrence Stroll bought it and fired him. So it'd be an interesting go back there. I wonder if Checo would kind of return to his normal self outside of the pressure cooker that is Red Bull. I mean, in his defense right now, he is competing against someone who's just
A monster.
monster just on talent, but also the performance is off the charts too, right? Because you have fast drivers
Yeah.
that have off days and like they don't have it this weekend. So this guy is just consistently just over. He's in the fastest car and he's overperforming it on a consistent basis to the point that no one's going to get near that. And being the teammate of someone like that. Now that's not an excuse for like not being able to put it on the front row. I mean, if look,
Yeah.
all due respect to Max, if he's 20 seconds better than the McLarens, which he is, Checo should be in second. Right?
He should be 10 seconds.
Yeah, or whatever. He should be in second. And actually, you look at qualifying. I mean, Max's lap to qualify was way ahead of everyone else. It was 128.877. Oscar and second was 129.458. So 0.6. But Checo in fifth, 129.650. That's almost a second off of your own teammate on a lap.
Yeah,
that is terrible.
Yeah.
Regardless of your teammates, Max Verstappen, you can't be doing that. That's awful. So that pressure's got to get to him, but I don't know who handles that pressure well. I don't think anyone will.
Nobody. It's funny. A lot of these teams they stack their teams with one guy's a really good qualifier, the other guy's a really good race driver. It's tough when you have a teammate who's good at both. You look at Hamilton and George. Hamilton is a great in the racecraft, great during the race. He's up there in qualifying. He's always been a good qualifier, solid qualifier. But if the car isn't at its best, obviously he's not, or if it's not the best car like it was for all those years, he's not going to be up there in P1. Max is the best qualifier in Formula One and the best race driver in Formula One. So it's like, it's hard to compete with that, man. I mean, Checo's always been a better race day driver than a qualifier. It's like George Russell. George Russell has always been a better qualifier than a race day driver. But it's tough to be in that pressure cooker, like you said. It's tough to be in that situation where it's like you have to perform, or else your job is on the line. And I mean, we all deal with situations like that in our own lives, but in the top level of Formula One, where there's 20 guys that do this, there's it's tough for anybody to live through that. It's tough for anybody to get through that.
Yeah, and maybe Ricardo is the right guy to manage that, just because he doesn't seem to care anymore. So
It's just chill.
Maybe that's what you need. Yeah, I mean, so that, like you said, silly season is kind of heating up. There hasn't really been any, there's been some confirmations of continuity there, and I think not that there's any doubt. But I think McLaren officially confirmed Piastri was, coming back. Not surprising.
Yeah.
All the big teams are kind of locked in. Hamilton got his deal done, I believe, over winter break, so through 25. So, the kind of 4 top teams on the grid are set, and it is, Lance Stroll is the first question mark there. And then after that, both the Alpine, they're coming back. There's just not a lot of AlphaTauri obviously confirmed their lineup. Whether or not that stays or not, we'll see based on what happens at Red Bull. But yeah, this is a very static field here. I will say, we got to bring about
contracts.
Yeah, and I think I feel like Alfa Romeo confirmed both their drivers too, right? Joe and
I believe they did.
Yeah, so that's not happening. I mean, the one. I mean, we got to talk about it. The American driver is not doing himself any favors here. He has still not scored any points. He had wrecked out again pretty badly. He basically locked up Bottas hit him on the start of the race, and then later Bottas tried to overtake him, and he locked up badly, knocked Bottas out of the race. Yeah, it's just I mean, I hate to say this, I can't imagine he's gonna be here next year, because they're go ahead.
It takes a couple seasons. It does take a couple seasons. That's all I was gonna say. Is that it does.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he's a lost cause. I'm saying I'm wondering if they're gonna be patient with him, because if you look at Williams, they're 7th in the constructor with 21 points. That's Albon with 21 points. It's tough to, it's tough to justify. I understand what you're saying, and I agree. It takes a while to kind of get it going. But you look at the only 3 drivers that haven't scored: Ricardo, De Vries, and Logan Sargent. And obviously Logan Sargent's the one that drove every race. Liam Lawson has already scored. So if you're Williams, you got to be looking at that second seat and saying we can probably do better than this. And again, score more points. They are 60 points behind Alpine for 6th. So even if Sargent was maximizing the car, which it feels like Albon is, you're not catching up to 6th anyway. So he didn't really cost him a constructor spot, but the numbers are pretty bad, and the performances are. I mean, we see him every weekend because he's hitting something or doing something. I mean, it's not. I don't even remember Albon that race, but I sure saw Logan Sargent. and so I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, it's okay. Go for it.
No, I was just like, I think they got to be evaluating that position, thinking is this why are we doing this?
Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is that there is some thought process of just like with Yuki being the Japanese driver on there and Joe being Chinese driver, there is a thought process of Formula One wants to have an American driver in the lineup. I mean, Formula One is owned by an American company. If I'm not mistaken, Williams is owned by an American company now too.
Yeah, it's like an investment.
Yeah, I mean, so they want to have an American in there. Is Logan Sargent the guy? I mean, right now it doesn't look like it, but we saw this with Yuki. We saw this with some of the other young drivers. those drivers that kind of get pushed up there a little bit quicker than other people, like Oscar Piastri, it took him time to get into that seat, but once he got there, obviously he's showing what he can do. Liam Lawson, it took time for him to get into that seat. Once he got there, he's doing what he does, and he's doing a great job, but the guys that they kind of say, oh yeah, we're going to promote this guy up, like a Yuki, like a Leo, or like a Logan Sargent, like a Mick Schumacher, even the guys that have the recognition for one reason or another, that isn't just that they're the fastest person in whatever series under, they get pushed up and then they have these issues. It's going to take a couple of years for Logan Sargent to be up, racing with the Albons or racing with the Yukis or racing, in that midfield pack. But there is something there in the thought process of, marketing, and the thought process of, trying to get that American driver and that American want to, or American driver to be up there with the rest of the guys. There's 3 races now in America. There's 4 or 5 races in North America. They want to have an American driver in that car. So
They do, but I guess at what cost? Because this is the thing, right? So I agree with what you're saying. In fact, let's be blunt, we all know why he's in that team in the first place. If he was Canadian, he would not be in that team. But I don't know that the marketing payoff has been there. Like, I'm curious if most Americans that are watching Formula One even know that he's American or who he is. Like, they're fans of like Max and Hamilton.
Yeah.
So that's one factor. The other factor is he's not the American that was wanted. It was Colton Herta, who was much more ready for this opportunity. And because again, it would have brought in IndyCar fans that maybe don't watch Formula One. It's a different market you might bring in. But also, he's frankly just much more ready to ascend to this level. Like, Sargent was okay in Formula 2, but he was able to get his license because Formula 2's points are weighted more. So again, it was similar conversation when we had Aston Martin. What is Williams trying to do here? Because they're certainly not maximizing the car with him in it. Patience is not something that's often seen in Formula One. So while you're logically arguing, give him some time, also, like, there is a tension because he's American, it takes a while to get up to speed in a Formula One car. All that stuff is true. Historically, Formula One has not been a patient sport. So, I mean, Mick, if you can fire a Schumacher, you can certainly fire a Sargent. So, I think that one, we'll see if Checo is technically confirmed, but we'll see if, that actually stays that way. Other than that, it's the Lance Stroll seat, and then it's the Williams, the second driver there, are the ones we're kind of watching. All right, there is no race this weekend, so we get a week off, and then it's Qatar, which again is a sprint race weekend, and very likely Max Verstappen wins the championship in the sprint race. Needs a few points to do that, but that's the weekend of October 6th through 8th. So on the 7th, when they do the sprint race, is probably when Max wins the championship. Evan, anything I missed or anything else you want to talk about Formula One wise before we wrap this up?
Oh, I mean, I did, mention it a little bit earlier. We did have one of the W Series drivers test for Aston Martin. Hawkins, I believe her name was. So that's just a cool story, especially for, obviously my sister comes on here and watches, and she enjoys, Formula One, and for the female perspective of it, the W Series, it should be getting more followers. Everybody, there's great racing that goes on in there, and there's good stuff that happens with them, and to see a female driver test for Formula One, is always a great thing. There was, a few female drivers that raced in Formula One over the years, and just something that I think is the next step. Getting some of those W Series drivers in those testing days and see if one of them sticks. Hopefully. And beyond that, McLaren, we didn't really talk about that much because they had a solid day. They had a really solid day on Sunday, and the fact of the matter is Papaya Power is really here to hopefully, develop this car a little bit more for this year and push hard into next year and maybe, cut into that Red Bull lead a little bit more. But, it's always good to have a week off, especially towards the latter stage of the year. There's 5 races left, 6 races left, I think. And 2 of them are here in America. So, these teams are going to take this week and really develop the car a little bit more, make sure that they get their rest and get their everything set up for this last push of the season. I think it's going to be an exciting end of the year. We all know who's going to win the championship, but everything else, it should be fun.
Yeah, no, it should be. And just to close the loop on that, you mentioned the W Series, of course, that folded and is replaced by now the F1 Academy. It's the same. It's a rebrand.
That's what I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I've always called it that.
No, it folded and was rebranded, and the F1 Academy, kind of exciting. This came out in July, but every team is going to have a car in the F1 Academy next year. So you mentioned Jessica Hawkins. She'll obviously be the Aston Martin, I'm assuming, maybe I should make that assumption, driver in that series. But this will actually, I feel, be a lot healthier than W Series, because as you mentioned, it deserved more support than it got, but it didn't. Like when I went to the Miami Grand Prix last year and covered it, like the W Series races were off hours, they were at bad times. They frankly didn't do a good job marketing it. Like I was sitting there and I would have obviously gone to the press conferences and stuff, but they just did them over Zoom. When the men were racing, you go to the conference room and do it in the press conference. So it was done very differently. And I think this is much more closely tied to the F1 teams. So there'll be more money in it. I think this will work a lot better. Yeah, it's really cool this year. And there's no reason that there shouldn't be female Formula One drivers. And I think we're going to see that in the future. So yeah, it's an exciting that she got in there and tested. And it's probably the first step in that happening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing you mentioned, and I think definitely the race now that I'm looking forward to. The championship's kind of over. That Vegas is definitely the one that I think we're all like, man, it's gonna be a spectacle, that's for sure.
Oh, it's definitely gonna be a spectacle.
Yeah, at 10 p.m. at night.
It's gonna be a fun track.
Yep.
I'll have it on. I will.
Yeah, you'll have it covered. It's 1 p.m. It's 1 a.m. here, so it's 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. in Vegas the night before. But yeah, no, that's going to be a spectacle. It's going to be a. All right, so
it's going to be fun.
Yeah. There's still some fun to happen, even though the championship's all but over. But anyway, Evan.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for holding it down with me, and thanks everyone for watching. Oh, look who showed up! Better late than never is damn right, Jack Daniels.
Jack.
Look at you showing up 48 minutes late. I was about to end the stream too. Well, how you doing, man? Thanks for watching, Jack. I'll see you next week.
Enjoy the replay, Jack.
Yes, enjoy the replay.